we shall talk about Zen again. So we have one sentence here in Allan Watts. The identification of the mind with the idea of the mind, its own idea of itself, leads to a paralysis, because then you cannot act spontaneously, because you will always check if you are acting according to the idea of yourself. Even if it will be a kind of adept of Zen, then you know from the lecture that you should be spontaneous. But this is an information, okay, that can become a cognitive kind of corrective model, and you will check yourself if you are spontaneous now, and this will lead to a paralysis, because you will not be spontaneous in the moment in which you try to be spontaneous. Well, this has been repeated many times by various deep thinkers. Allan Watts gives a nice comparison with a kind of thermostat. If you have a heating system in your room and you want to set the temperature too narrow, in a too narrow margin, like to say you would set the 20 degrees, should be 20 degrees. And in the moment it reaches 20 degrees, it would be the minimum. It should, improve and turn on and make it warmer. And if it reaches like 20 degrees, it should be too much. It should reduce it a little bit. So it would be the command to turn it on would be at the same time the cause of the command to turn it off, and so on and off, on and off, on and off, until the system breaks down. This is a comparison where we would say the real temperature, the temperature of the air is your, in our biocentric phenomenology, we would say body and soul. That is the so-called suchness, the so as it is, and the algorithmic or temperature adjustment in the machine would be your conscious mind, which has a plan how it should be, how you should live, how you should be brave and moral and responsible, and it could be some philosophy or some moral teaching, some religion, and even Zen as a theory. So there must not be a too narrow identification between, as Allan Watts says, the mind and the idea of the mind. The idea of the mind, okay, the idea of itself, which leads then to the very many nice paradoxical stories in Zen that we laugh about, like if the master is asked, what is the meaning of Buddhism, he shouts like, a frog or something like that, because he wants to stop. Even if he wants to stop himself, it's already wrong. He must simply be like a child and shout even before you finish the question, because he doesn't want to fall into this corrective cognitive thinking about how he should reply as a achieved Zen master, that maybe he should reply spontaneously. He should not think, so he will, he will get into the trap of being, intentionally spontaneous, which Allan Watts in some other place in his book has the story of an intellectual scholar of Zen who comes from the West to a really good master, and when the master gives him his koan, what was the meaning of your soul before you were born, or something like that, and how you should clap with one hand. He was prepared, and he put forward a frog which he had in his pocket or a box. And the master knows that this guy knows that he should be spontaneous, and so that's why he prepared a spontaneous reaction by organizing the frog, which certainly was an intentional series of acts, and thinking about his ends and so on. And so he refuses. This is no, too intellectual. Okay, even overtly, it would seem like a childish gesture to produce a frog. If the asked person would simply look at him, at the great master, and laugh or something like that, that would be spontaneous, but it must not be played now. So what is, everybody knows that, who is deep in Zen. And what we have a little contribution today, well, naturally it's the biocentric phenomenology. That we had an insight when reading this sentence. Well, our biocentric computational unit in our memory had a kind of an insight how we could explain it without the Zen terminology. If an idea, if in an English word, we have always stressed that the word mind is a difficult terrain. It is a hybrid. It can be anything. So to understand it in biocentric terms, we have to, in phenomenology terms, we have to split it. So the sentence, when the mind has an idea of itself, we say, when the mirror of the soul, the actual phenomenal experience, a stream of phenomena, is stopped by a conscious idea of what it should experience, what should be morally correct, how to experience, how to feel, what kind of emotions and what kind of actions it should do, then we have the same situation as Allan Watts describes. Okay, so the model, the plan, the conscious reflection is not the original spontaneous reflection of the mirror of the soul. So this is the great difference now. And then what is the consequence? Allan Watts then points out that if the control of the spontaneous life, of the spontaneous acting is too strong, then there happens a paralysis. You cannot act because you all the time control yourself if you are acting spontaneously. Or in a layman who doesn't know anything about it, but nevertheless has a kind of moral and cognitive model how to behave properly, either created by himself to study of some religion or moral or law or whatever, or something which was imposed on him by super ego structure of education, school, family, and so on. Then he cannot act because he mistrusts his natural perceptions of the body and natural emotions of the soul. He compares them to the book of rules, what should be. Okay. Now we take the second situation in which we have an accomplished scholar, a philosopher, somebody who knows Nietzsche, and he knows phenomenology, he knows Zen, and he nevertheless feels like we do sometimes a kind of a blockade that we know that all, and we want to be spontaneous, and we want to be creative. I mean, it's already a paradox. If we want to be that this naturally possible spontaneity which arises from perception of the body and a flux of the emotion of the soul becomes blocked by our knowing how it should be. This is what Allan Watts means. Now, what our insight was, if we split it, the word mind, into the description, the situation is this: the spontaneous mirror of the soul, the flux of phenomena, emotions and perceptions cannot let us say, cannot be drawn into the morphogenetic field of some greater entity, because in our morphogenetic theory of behavior and feeling in biocentric phenomenology, we have this idea of metaphysical influence on our acting, feeling, and thinking by supposing that there are these primordial images. There are these, what you call aggregates. There are these information clouds of similar content, but the content is not analytical or digital or purely informational. The content is living, soul, emotional, pictorial, a kind of software of, even as you have said, even as Sheldrake would put it, the morphogenetic field of a cat species is a kind of information how a small cat, when it is born, how it should get grown, how it should be formed. So it is a kind of software field now. And this applies to all. To all feeling, imagining, motion of the body. And so we say that if you are too observant, if you have this cognitive idea of how you should be, good, spontaneous, creative, and so on, then you immediately cut yourself from the real source of creativity, spontaneity, and a kind of goodness, quote unquote, that is life-supporting action, which comes from a unification of your soul field with those larger soul field, and then embodying the inspiration you get. This is what is it? It is an updating of Zen in the sense that you don't have to rely purely on your own organs of perception, on your own body to tell you how to react. You don't have to become an animal-like creature, and you don't have to rely only on your emotions. First emotion you have, that should be the true at any cost. No? I think that Zen then acknowledges this existence of the metaphysical realm of these morphogenetic fields of inspirational clouds, and so by its poetry, by its devotion to the beautiful garden, trees, and devotion to a clear interior and more a natural kind of interior and exterior of the houses, of the gardens and so on, because they want to be in flow with that, they want to be touched with that, they want to be inspired by that. So naturally there is a great also danger that you, when you know this, that you can be inspired, and you are actually inspired by these morphogenetic fields, but the greater informational clouds, and you should let your ego go. That is, you should dissolve your ego so that it loses the cognitive idea of how it should be, even in relation to this biocentric phenomenology. Well, I have lost myself in the circle of argumentation. Well, what? Yes, it gives another explanation, which is more European, let us say, more metaphysical, to the Zen practice. Once more repetition. If the soul and body, which are in biocentric phenomenology a unity of life, phenomenal experience, and a kind of not disturbed by the derivations of the ego, and we know that the ego and its 5 derivations themselves are functional changes of the soul field, okay, then if you clear them, if you dissolve them, and in biocentric phenomenology there's a talk about ecstasy, and it's the ecstasy can take the shape of sport, of creative artistic ecstasy, or a mystical ecstasy when you are overwhelmed by the night sky, okay. And the artistic, erotic ecstasy is when you look at the sun rays touching the leaf of a tree in a wood, and you feel that this is it. This is the never to be repeated phenomenal experience. This would be similar to all those haiku definitions, haiku description, the swabi, and so that, which basically are moments of this immediate perception connected with some emotional quality, like, loneliness or astonishment about the hugeness of space and stuff like that. Okay, you have this. You have this. What is the difference to Zen? That we formulate in biocentric phenomenology, it probably in other vocabulary, and maybe sometimes, at least in the fact that we have translated this from English, that we have split the word mind again. Okay, and this is the fruit of many of my deep thinking expeditions to English texts, that the splitting of the word mind into, on the one side, soul and body, and on the other side into cognitive reflection, consciousness, self-consciousness, will to power, conceptualized thinking, and objectifying perception. We have these 5 derivations of the soul field emanating out of the center ego. This is very helpful to understand what is meant even in those texts describing Zen. If the master of Zen achieves all this without wanting to achieve it, which is genuinely spontaneous, then he lives in a continuous stream of perceptions of the body, on emotions of the soul that are not checked, that are not controlled, that are not compared, and that are not induced by his knowing how he should be, and that he should be spontaneous, and it should be good, and so on. Then he simply is it. This is the suchness. And if he has a moment of reading and reflection on his life, he can read these sentences and say, okay, mind cannot control itself. By the command, be spontaneous, because it's absurd, because this command is at the same time an intentional and cannot be spontaneous. So that's why the result are these paradoxes and this getting away from the situation by an act. That's why the Koan, which is intended to break down this stalemate situation in which you could turn forever, like this thermostat, when it is 20 degrees, it must be turned on because it's the lower limit of temperature. Okay, turn it on, but in the same time, immediately the 20 degrees is the limit of the upper temperature, so it must be turned down, and so it goes on and on until it breaks down the system, and the breaking down of the system is the release of cognitive control in the Koan, in the Satori, in the breaking down of the Koan, the Satori experiences. Now, our European biocentric phenomenological explanation, what does it bring? It brings a deeper understanding, because we split the mind. We are more aware of the fact that the temperature in the room that the thermostat is measuring is the phenomenal reality. We are experiencing all the time original and, let us say, unique perceptions of the body, because we are growing older, the day hour is different, the season of the year is different, the locality of our body is different. So the perceptions, if we really open to them, passively are always original. It could be enough to inspire us. At the same time, emotions that we experience are original individual, unique, naturally, but at the same time, both of these levels are taking part in the embodiment of greater wholes, of these primordial images that structure the shape of our organs all the time. This is the anthropos primordial image, the software image of the growth of our body, and the emotional storage of anthropoid, and maybe even elemental or plant and animal-like emotions that were stored in the Akashic records of the locality of the planet Earth where we live, and we can take part in it. Doesn't it turn a little bit mystical again, let us say, Gnostic again, that we are, could be inclined to study all this. No, we must stop there, knowing that the intentional study of that is done. It has happened. We understand it. We accept it. That would be the lesson of the Zen master. Don't make it like a professional disease that all the time watching yourself if you are embodying the proper anthropos software in your body, and if you are emotionally drinking the right cup of inspiration. It cannot be done intentional because it is unintentional, it is subconscious, it is the embodiment of the primordial images, okay? But at least in the moment of doubt or kind of self-assurance moment, which certainly will come, and even in Zen there is this advice, don't be, too observant in the sense that you would like even to stop your worry, or if you worry, then worry. But don't get carried away by it. If you want to find the explanation of your Zen philosophy, then do it, né? And don't worry. So the biocentric phenomenology would give us a kind of cognitive understanding of what is happening with us, and how it should even, help us. We are not only, well, the Zen master has the same, in the sense that he is embedded in his garden, in his Zen garden, in his interior, in his tea ceremony, in his motion, in his calligraphy, and so on. This is an embodiment of this world of primordial images that is continuously shaping his everyday. Ne? We have to run into the romantic woods because our European civilization has not realized the importance of it on an institutional, cultural level, that we should surround ourselves with life-supporting embodiment of primordial images that manifest life, that manifest the Tao. Okay, so this is what we have to improve. Okay. you.